Good morning, fabulous fourth grade. This is from our book, Charlie Bone and the Time Twister. We are on page 48. Lysander was feeling the cold more than most, but being a good humored person, has his complaints were made in friendly, almost jokey way. What he actually said to Tancred was, "Tank, what have you done to the weather?" "Not you, too!" Tancred jumped up and stamped his foot. "I thought that you, of all people, would know better." Before Lysander could reply, Manfred Bloor spoke up. "Come on, Tancred, spare a thought for our friend here. You're freezing him to death." "I'm not!" screeched Tancred, tearing at his crackling hair. "He's only joking, Tank," said Lysander with a smile. And this time, some of the children were beginning to feel uncomfortable. Charlie was practically concerned. Lysander and Tancred had saved him from the ruin. Together, they were a powerful force against the darker powers that lurked in Bloor's academy. He couldn't bear to see them quarreling. "Are you on his side now?" Tancred demanded, glaring at his old ally. "Everyone's on my side," snickered Manfred. Lysander silently shook his head, but unfortunately, Zelda Dubinsky chose that moment to show off her particularly nasty gift for moving things. She was staring at a huge reference book on the shelves behind Tancred. The book launched itself across the room and caught Tancred in the back, just as he whirled toward the door. "Ow!" roared Tancred. 6 children burst into wild laughter, while 5 looked on in horror. Tancred didn't notice the sympathetic faces. He was only aware of the mocking laughter. Wind rushed furiously around the room as the stormy boy swept through the door, leaving it banging violently against the wall. Charlie couldn't stop himself. "Wait!" he cried, leaping up after Tancred. "And where do you think you're going, Bone?" said Manfred. "I've left my pins in the coat room," lied Charlie. A scrawny red-haired boy looked up and sneered. "Always forgetting things, aren't you, Bone?" "Not always, Asa." Charlie was scared of Asa Pike. He was Manfred's sidekick and had a very nasty talent for changing his shape. "Close the door," said Asa as Charlie stepped outside. Charlie pulled the door shut behind him. The passage outside was deserted, and Charlie decided to try the hall. As he descended the wide staircase, a blast of Arctic air almost rocked him off his feet. He stepped down into the stone-slated hall and stood very still. Something was happening to his eyes. He was seeing things that should not be there. A cloud of sparkling particles swirled in the very center of the long room. Was it an ice storm? Gradually, the pale fragments grew more vivid. Now they were forming a blurred shape, blue with a touch of black beneath it. Before Charlie's astonished gaze, a figure in a blue hooded cape was materializing. Charlie had no doubt that he was seeing a ghost, but when the figure turned to face him, he found to his horror that he was looking at himself. Chapter Hiding Henry. It was the other Charlie who spoke first. "What a joke," said the boy. "I haven't traveled very far at all." He had such a normal sort of voice, Charlie was reassured. This wasn't a ghost, but if not a ghost, what was it? Clearing his throat, he asked, "Where have you come from exactly?" "Here," said the boy. "Just now. I was here, but—" He shaded his eyes with his hand and gazed up at the row of electric lights illuminating the hall. "It wasn't like this." "How did it get so bright?" "Electricity," said Charlie. He was beginning to recognize the boy. "Are you?" he began. "I mean, have you? Well, the thing is, I've seen you in a photo. Are you Henry Eubeam?" "That's me," said Henry, beaming. "I think I've seen you, too, somewhere. Who are you?" "I'm your, sort of cousin, Charlie Bone." "No. This is very good news. A cousin. Well, well." Henry marched over and shook Charlie's hand. "Very glad to meet you, Charlie Bone." "The news isn't that good," said Charlie. "What was the date when just now?" "January 12th, 1916, said Henry. "I always know the date." "I'm afraid it isn't that now." "No?" Henry's smile began to fade. "So you're almost 90 years ahead of where you were," said Charlie. Henry's mouth opened, but no words came out. Instead, there was a sharp ping as something dropped out of his hand and it hit the floor. Charlie saw a large glass marble rolling across the hall. Wow! He exclaimed. But before he could pick it up, Henry shouted, Careful, Charlie, don't look at it. Why? It's what brought me here. Charlie stood back from the shining glass marble. You mean it brought you through time? Henry nodded. It's a time twister. My mom told me about it, but I'd never seen it until just now. I should have guessed that it was what it was. I knew Zeke would try and punish me. Zeke? My cousin, Ezekiel Bloor. Henry suddenly grinned. I say he's probably dead by now, and then a sad and solemn expression crossed his face. They're probably all dead. Mother, father, even my brother, James. There's no one left. There's me, said Charlie, and I think your brother is. And at that moment, a dreadful howl came from the stairs above them. The boys looked up to see a squat, ugly looking dog standing at the top of the stairs. It howled again, raising its long nose toward the roof, while folds of almost hairless skin shook beneath its whiskery chin. What an ugly beast, Henry whispered. It's Cook's dog, Blessed. Charlie didn't wait for the dog to howl again. Quick, he said, grabbing Henry's arm. You've got to hide. This isn't a good place for you to be right now. There are people here who might do something nasty if they find out who you are. Why? Asked Henry, his eyes widening. Just a feeling, said Charlie. Come on. He dragged Henry toward the door into the west wing. Where are we going? Said Henry, scooping up the time twister and slipping it into his pocket. For a moment, Charlie had no idea why he was taking Henry into the west wing. He turned the heavy brass ring in the door and pushed his new friend into the dark passage beyond. I know this place, whispered Henry. I never liked it. Nor me, said Charlie, but we have to go this way to find somewhere safe. He closed the door behind him just as Bless gave another mournful howl. The two boys made their way along the passage until they reached an empty circular room. A dim light hanging from the ceiling showed an ancient wooden door, and opposite the door a flight of stone steps. The tower? Henry looked at the steps and made a face. It was then that Charlie realized why he had brought Henry to this place. You'll be safe at the top, he said. Will I? Henry looked doubtful. Trust me, said Charlie. As Henry began to mount the steps, Charlie noticed his peculiar tweed pants. They reached only to the knee, where a button held them in place over loose gray socks. Henry's boots looked distinctly feminine. Black and shiny, they were neatly laced just above the ankle. We'd better find you some new clothes, Charlie muttered as they reached a second circular room. A door led off this room into the west wing, but Charlie urged Henry up a second flight of steps. The Bloors lived through there, he said. Interesting, said Henry. Some things haven't changed then. They kept climbing upward, but long before they reached the top of the tower, the sound of a piano could be heard, echoing down the narrow stairwell. Henry stopped. There's someone up there. It's the piano teacher, Mr. Pilgrim, said Charlie. No one else comes up here, and Mr. Pilgrim doesn't really notice things. He won't be a problem, promise. Another two sets of stairs brought them to the small room at the top of the tower. Sheets of music lay scattered on the floor, and the shelves that ran from the floor to ceiling were crammed with huge leather-bound albums and thick dog-eared sconces and scores. It'll be warm here, said Charlie, moving several piles away from the bookcase. You see, if we put some paper on the floor like this, and he spread several sheets of music between the bookcase and a wall of piled scores, it'll make a sort of bed, and you can hide here till morning. And then what? Said Henry. Well, Charlie scratched his head, then I'll find a way to go get you some breakfast and maybe some new clothes. What's wrong with my clothes? Henry gave an ancient frown. They're just different. We don't wear things, that kind of stuff now. Henry glanced at Charlie's long gray trousers and thick-soled shoes. No, so I see, he said. I'd better be getting back, said Charlie. The head boy, Manfred Bloor, will be after me, and I don't want to get on the wrong side of him. He hypnotizes. Oh, one of those. Henry had heard about the hypnotizers in his families. Are you one of them? He asked Charlie, the endowed. Afraid so, said Charlie. That's how I knew you. What about him? Henry pointed to the door behind which the rich piano music flowed on. He won't bother you, said Charlie. Bye now. He gave a wave and backed out of the small room, feeling inexplicably guilty. In the king's room, a boy with a long, sad face glanced anxiously at Charlie's empty seat. The boy's name was Gabriel Silk, and he worried about Charlie. He should have gone after Tancred, not let Charlie go. Charlie was younger and likely to land in some sort of trouble. He was the kind of boy unfortunate things happened to. And then the howling began. At first, they all tried to ignore it, but in the end, Manfred flung down his pen and exclaimed, "Bloody dog! Billy, go and shut it up." "I'll go," Gabriel offered. "I said Billy." Manfred gave Gabriel one of his horrible stares and then turned his piercing black gaze on Billy. "Go on," he said. "You can talk to the wretched thing. As Ask it if it's got a bellyache." "Yes, Manfred." Billy scurried to the door, and as he ran down the chilly stairwells and the dark corridors, he talked to himself. He hated when everyone else was shut away doing homework. He was afraid of meeting the ghosts. He knew that they were there, gliding about in the dark. Billy never went home. He had no home to go to. Sometimes he stayed with an aunt, but not often. He had reached the wide landing where a grand staircase led down into the hall. Blessed was sitting at the top of the stairs, still howling. Billy sat beside the dog and put one hand on its plump back. "What's the matter, Blessed?" The words came out in a series of little grunts and sniffs, a language that Blessed could understand. The old dog stopped howling. "Boy came," he said. "Bad thing. Wrong." "What boy? Why is it wrong?" asked Billy. Bliss considered the question. He seemed to be having some difficulty with his reply. At last he grunted, "Boy came from nowhere, with ball, very small, shiny. Bless not like this ball. It bad magic." Billy was perplexed. "Was it Tancred?" he asked. "Boy with lots of yellow hair?" "No, boy was like that one." Bless staring down the hall. Following the dog's gaze, Billy was surprised to see Charlie Bone quietly closing the door into the west wing. "Where have you been?" Billy asked. Charlie looked up startled. "Nowhere," he said, "just looking for Tancred. Bless said another boy was here, a boy like you." Bless got a vivid imagination. Charlie began to cross the hall. "He says there was a ball. It was small and shiny, and he didn't like it." "I think Bless was dreaming," said Charlie, climbing the stairs toward Billy. Billy looked at the old dog. "Bless doesn't lie," he said. "Dogs can't." "They can dream, can't they?" "Come on, Billy. We'd better get back to our homework or we'll get detention." "Go back to cook," Billy told the dog. "Go on, Bless. No more howling." Bless gave a sullen grunt and began to flop down the stairs, while Billy and Charlie ran back to the king's room. When homework was over, Charlie had half a mind to go and visit Henry. He didn't like leaving him alone in the tower, nearly 100 years from where he was supposed to be. Of course, he wasn't quite alone, but Mr. Pilgrim hardly counted. Charlie badly needed to confide in someone. When he reached the dormitory, he found Fidelio filling his closet with clothes from his bag. There were two boys from the drama department in the room, and Charlie couldn't risk being overheard. "I want to ask you something," he whispered to his friend. "Can we go somewhere else?" "The art room," Fidelio said softly, and as they came out of the dormitory, they walked straight into Billy Raven. "Be careful what you say," Fidelio whispered as they sped down the corridor. "I used to feel sorry for Billy, but I don't like the way he watches people." "Someone's got to him," said Charlie. "I don't know who it is, but they're making him spy for them. I don't think Billy can help it." They reached the art room. "Light's still on," Charlie commented, "but no one's here. Mr. Baldova might come back," warned Fidelio. "We'd better hide over there." A large painting of trees had been propped against two easels near the wall, and the boys managed to squeeze behind it and squat on the floor in a hushed voice. Charlie began to tell his friend about the sudden appearance of Henry, the boy with the time twister who vanished nearly 100 years ago. However, as soon as he mentioned the voices in the photograph, Fidelio clutched his arm. "Hold on," he said. "Do you mean you can hear what's going on in photos?" Charlie nodded. He had never told Fidelio about his peculiar talent. "I don't like people to know," he muttered. "I don't think I would either," said Fidelio. "Don't worry, I won't tell a soul. Go on about Henry. Where is he now?" "I took him up to the top of the music tower. I couldn't think of anywhere else." "What about Mr. Pilgrim?" "He won't even notice Henry. And if he does," Charlie hesitated, "I don't think he'll harm him." I wonder. You can't tell with Mr. Pilgrim," murmured Fidelio. "So what are you going to do with this long lost great uncle?" "I thought I'd try and smuggle him home at the weekend, but first I've got to get some food to him. Lunch break would be best," said Fidelio. "He can have my meat. if it's not mince, and you can sneak up the tower while I. He broke off suddenly as a face appeared at the top of the tree painting. What are you doing? Asked Emma Tully. Charlie was tempted to tell her. She was, after all, a friend as well as endowed, but something held him back. We're just talking, he said. Can't get any peace in the dorm. I know, Emma sighed. I came to finish a drawing. We were just going, said Fidelio. The two boys wriggled out from behind the painting. Just as they were leaving the art room, Charlie caught sight of a large sketch book lying open on a table. He stared at it and moved closer. It's mine, said Emma. Just sketches, nothing special. But they were special. Both pages of the open book were covered with pictures of birds, birds in flight, swooping, hovering, soaring, and diving. They were so real, Charlie felt that if he touched them, he would feel real feathers. They're brilliant, he murmured. And I'm going to stop there.